Hello, Nasdaq followers, and welcome to a very special edition of Nasdaq Spotlight. I'm your producer and host, Leanne Alfaro. Joining me on set is Stephane Kasriel. He is the CEO of Upwork. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit more about Upwork. Nasdaq is very familiar with it. We use it as the enterprise to hire a lot of our freelancers and do a lot of the videos and work we do here. But give us an overview of the platform.
And thank you for being a great customer. We love working with you guys. So we're a website that connects businesses with freelancers. And basically, we are the place where businesses find developers, designers, consultants, and any number of other professional services. We do this across 70 categories, 5,000 skills, 180 countries. We have now been publicly listed on the Nasdaq for about a year. And this year we're going to do about $2 billion of what we call gross services volume, which is the amount of money that is paid by companies to freelancers, of which we take about 12%. And so our net revenue, GAAP revenue for the company is going to be about $300 million this year.
That's incredible. Now, those are a lot of skills, 5,000 skills. Tell us a little bit about what some of those skills are and the kinds of freelancers that we'll find on Upwork.
Yeah, so you find any type of person that can do work online. So it's not blue collar work. These are not people that are going to be installing electricity in your office or cleaning up the desks. They are people that do work remotely, typically from home or a co-working space, but really across any type of category. So we have people doing fairly mainstream work like front-end website development or building mobile apps or doing graphic design for your next event or what have you. And then we have a long tail of skills that are extremely hard for companies to find. We do blockchain development, we do AI research, we do medical imagery, like any type of things that you need real experts, people that have a PhD, and you just can't find them locally. You may not need them full-time. They may not want to work for you full-time.
So we have highly technical people, highly qualified people, also working at the cusp of what's next in technology.
Yeah, so you tend to see early trends on Upwork faster than in the traditional job market. We are typically the first place where new things get launched before traditional employees have the skills. Because as a freelancer, you're only as good as the skills you have today, and so you have to reskill yourself constantly.
And now you have an endless pool to choose from.
Yes.
So it should come as no surprise then that your Q2 revenues grew nearly 20% at about 74 million. So what are some of your keys to success in that regard?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is building extremely strong competitive moats. Network effects are incredibly strong in this business. AI is really important. We're matching hundreds of thousands of freelancers with hundreds of thousands of jobs so that jobs get filled on average in less than 3 days. And then there's complex software underpinning all of this. We operate in employment, which is highly regulated. We do payments, which is also highly regulated. So doing it in a way that is compliant with regulations and is keeping everybody safe is a key competency to the business. And all of that is fueled by a very strong customer satisfaction rate. Our net promoter score is in the upper 60s, which is where beloved brands like Amazon and Amex are. And that drives a lot of retention. It drives a lot of word of mouth, which ultimately is fueling the growth of the business. And all of that, the underpinning is it's harder and harder for companies to attract top talent. And increasingly so with younger generations. The millennials, our Gen Z, are even more likely to be freelancing than the past generations. And so what we see increasingly is employers trying to get access to the best talent and realizing that the traditional way of doing it, which is full-time and on-site, is no longer working for them. And therefore, they come to Upwork to find the great talent there.
So what we're talking about right now is the gig economy. And you've said that 10 years down the road, most of the business for Upwork will be enterprise.
Yes.
So enterprise, places like Nasdaq. Could you tell us a little bit more about the role that enterprise will play in the future for Upwork?
Sure. I mean, if you think about the underlying addressable market, there's about $560 billion worth of work that can be done on a platform like Upwork. But it mirrors the overall economy. And if you look at the bulk of the GDP and the bulk of jobs in the US right now are with larger companies. And historically, Upwork was a place for early stage tech startups to find developers. But progressively, as we've become mainstream, more and more of our business is done with larger organizations that need dozens or even hundreds of freelancers at any point in time. We now have 50 clients that spend over $1 million on the site each year, and that number is only going to be growing, and it's going to be fueling the growth of the business in the future.
And how do we differentiate Upwork from other platforms that also house freelancers?
Yes, so we have 4 different product offerings that go from our basic product, which is for very small businesses, all the way to our enterprise offering, which is what the Nasdaq is using, and the biggest employers in the world typically use our enterprise business. So each of them has a set of existing competitors, and I would say they fall in 2 categories. One is other tech platforms that are trying to build the next generation of staffing and professional services, if you will. And typically the way we differentiate there is just being much bigger, and therefore being able to do job matching better than anybody else, being able to do quality control, vetting and underwriting of the freelancer quality much better than anybody else. But increasingly in the bigger companies, the enterprise space, we're replacing traditional staffing firms and traditional professional services firms. And so there the business model is radically different. Those companies tend to have lots and lots of salespeople, lots and lots of recruiters, lots and lots of account managers and project managers. We replace that with automation and technology. And so at scale, this business creates a lot of leverage. And you actually see it in the numbers today. Our gross margin went up 3 percentage points year on year. Mm-hmm. And that's coming from this idea that with scale, we don't need to double the number of engineers. We don't need to double the cost of running the site. And therefore, we're becoming more and more profitable over time.
And that has been incredible to see that you can put a job out there and find high caliber candidates, and also how easy it is to onboard. So for example, if I know somebody already who's fit for the job, they can easily sign up and get paid via Upwork.
Yes, and that's one of the ways we grow in the enterprise space. What we find is a lot of really big companies have a long tail of suppliers that they work with. They're very happy working directly with McKinsey and Accenture, but when it comes to tens of thousands of independent contractors they work with, and hundreds or even thousands of small boutique agencies and professional services organizations, they're not equipped to do that in a compliant way. They're not equipped to negotiate rates properly, and they're really not equipped to manage quality. And that's really where the software comes in. They bring those agencies and those freelancers that they're already working with onto the Upwork platform so that we can leverage the software to help them manage that workforce better.
Now let's talk a little bit more about freelancing in the US. We have Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers coming in on Friday. So how does your survey compare with today's economic environment?
Yeah, so our survey, Freelancing in America, is really a zoom on the freelancers themselves. So in a way, it's a add-on to the BLS study. We've tried to build a panel that replicated as closely as possible the panel that the BLS uses. But generally, it's telling the same story, which is the labor market is incredibly tight right now. Not only is the unemployment rate at a historical low, but generally the workforce participation rate is also extremely high, meaning there's not a ton of slack in the job market. And that is why employers increasingly come to Upwork, because they just can't find the talent locally.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of your views on today's labor market? What will it look like in 3 to 5 years?
Yes, so there's the short term and the long term. And I would say in the short term, we know what's going to happen, and we need to make sure that it helps people along the way, that everybody's better off as the economy is moving. And what's very clear is the pace of skills is accelerating right now. And that means that whatever you know today is only going to be half as valuable 5 years from now. And you should not wait 5 years to reskill yourself. And so this shift towards lifelong learning is going to be really essential. We see it a lot with freelancers. 65% of skilled freelancers in the US have taken some amount of reskilling classes in the last 6 months. That's almost twice as much as non-freelancers. And so what's really happening here in the economy is freelancers are staying on top of where the job market is going, and traditional employees are being left behind.
And so alternately, what does this mean then for enterprises who are looking to hire these freelancers? What can they kind of expect?
Yes, so increasingly they come to us because we have access to specialized talent that they cannot groom internally. The pace of change is going so fast right now that companies no longer have the time to reskill their employees constantly for whatever comes next. So they come to a platform like Upwork to get things done in a way that augments their existing employees, gives access to these employees to the skills that are in demand by leveraging freelancers.
Now, what are some of the key takeaways, would you say, from the survey for both freelancers, and you've already touched on this, but also for enterprises and small businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. One is the freelance economy is a lot bigger than most people think. Freelancers in the US last year earned $1 trillion. And to give a reference, that's about 5% of GDP. That is larger than the construction industry, as an example. And so there's a really big talent pool. It's a third of the US workforce, 57 million people freelanced in the last year. And therefore, as a company, you really want to have access to that talent. The second thing that is, to me, very eye-opening about that talent pool is 46% of them say they cannot take a traditional job. And that's typically because of health reasons. Lots of people with physical disabilities, people that have mental health issues, or because of care duties, people that have young children, elderly parents. And so again, in a world where there's a big skills gap, companies are really struggling to attract talent, playing the same game as everybody else, which is looking for full-time employees that are willing to come on site and commit to 9 to 5, is not where you're going to get access to this talent. You need to come online and find freelancers who otherwise would not be included in your job pool.
I'd like to explore your thoughts on how this might change the way that enterprises operate in the future, with more freelancers coming into the ecosystem and working with these people who are consistently reskilling.
Yeah, I mean, at the extreme, if you think about the concept of a firm, of a company, it's really a network of individuals. And the question is, how tightly coupled should those individuals be with the company? The traditional job market was invented in the 19th century. Before that, everybody was a freelancer. And in a way, we're going back to where we were before. And the reason why that makes sense is because work is getting more specialized. And when everybody's more of a specialist, you see what's already happened in the movie industry, and it's happening pretty quickly in professional services, which is you can't have one of every single skill that you have internally. And increasingly, for work to get organized in the most optimal way, both parties are better off in a more loosely coupled type of environment where you bring experts on demand when you need them. You may rehire them as a different part of your organization later on for a different project, but you don't have to have silos where everybody does the same work over and over again.
Now, there's been a lot of controversy about where the future of work is headed. I mean, when you talk about tech, when you talk about the gig economy, what's kind of your take on that, and how should we be preparing for it?
Well, I would say I would start by asking people what they think. And in the survey that we run, we ask freelancers, do you think that the best days are ahead? And that number keeps on growing. It's now at 91% of freelancers say they think the best days are ahead. And so generally, I would say people are very upbeat about the future of work, and particularly skilled freelancers are very upbeat about where this is going. That is not to say that everything is perfect. And I would say the whole ecosystem around work was designed for the traditional full-time job. You get access to benefits from your employers, you get training from your employer, you get loans because you have a traditional W-2 and your credit score is easy to score. All of these things need to be reinvented for the freelance economy, and that is clearly where the future of work is going. And so it's a huge opportunity for the private sector. If you're a fintech company, you're an insurtech company, you're an online training company, I mean, there's a reason why co-working spaces are growing like crazy. We can talk about WeWork if we want to, but generally, they've all been growing really, really well. And that's driven by this idea that work is being done in a different way, and therefore the whole ecosystem around work gets reinvented at the same time.
Well, we are so eager to see how this reinvention takes place and to be a part of that revolution alongside Upwork.
Thank you.
Stephane, thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to checking out more findings from the survey. But in the meantime, we hope to have you back in studio soon.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned for another episode of Nasdaq Spotlight and more updates coming to you right here from the Nasdaq Market site.